If you would love to create a transformational and successful coaching business, but you don't know where to start or how to make this a full-time career, then my new certification program, Influential Coach, is for you. There is no other 4-month live online mastermind like this. I'm going all in, guns blazing on this one with you to skyrocket your coaching career and personal brand online. You will learn the frameworks I personally use for rapid transformational coaching so you can support your clients to achieve their dreams no matter where they are in life. You will also learn how to authentically brand and market yourself as a coach so you can stand out from the rest and build a career of freedom and fulfillment. Spots are limited and this is an application-only program. So if you're serious about finally committing to building a successful career in transformational coaching, then head over to iamjoelbrown.com/coach and apply today. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Addicted to Success podcast. I'm your host, Joel Brown, and I am super excited today to introduce to you our amazing guest. His name is Joe Foster. Now, you may be familiar with his brand, with his business. It is a world-class, world-famous brand. It is called Reebok. And Joe recently has launched his book, Shoemaker. I tell you what, there's so much wisdom that is instilled within Joe. And Joe, I cannot wait for you to share this with the Addicted to Success audience today. So welcome to the A2S podcast.
Thank you for the invitation, Joel. It's something I've looked forward to, writing the book and telling people the real true story about the origins of Reebok.
Wonderful stuff. Yeah. So let's break that down real quick, because I know obviously Reebok is a big worldwide brand. And I could imagine that you've gone through some struggles along the way. But before we hit into the real juicy, meaty part, just if you could break it down in a nutshell, in a quick 30 seconds to a minute, what was the start? Like, would this start with you for Reebok?
The start, I think, is really from my grandfather. He made a very successful business. His sons, my father and uncle, they didn't carry on that. They somehow lost it. And Jeff and myself, we saw a failing company when we came to it. So we left the company and set up our own company. Originally Mercury, but we became Reebok.
Yes, I heard about this. It is funny when you've got this idea in your head, and I know what it's like to have a big vision for the future, and you get fixated like, oh, we're going to make it like this, it's going to sound like that, and then you hit this roadblock. I think that it's almost like this blessing in disguise when you end up having to change it to something else and it takes off. Do you feel like you've had maybe 2 to 3 moments where you were going to take your business or brand in one way and you had this awesome miracle or something unfold, which ended up being an even better thing for Reebok or for you?
I think what really happens when, as far as Jeff and I were concerned, and myself in particular, Jeff loved to be in the factory. He just liked making the shoes, and he wanted me to do everything else. So I did everything else, which a lot of the designing and all the marketing and sales, and did all the traveling. What it was, of course, is that our grandfather in 1895, he is credited with inventing, or at least pioneering, the spike running shoe. And that sort of becomes the DNA that we grew up with. And even though his sons, my father and uncle, even though they didn't seem to have that spirit, that energy, they just sort of continued with the business. But when Jeff and I came to the business, we sort of saw a failing business. The story is, of course, that we grew up during World War II, and we were in Boy Scouts, which does give you a bit of sort of energy. You do some pioneering, you do different things. There were no lights on; it was all blackout. But you don't think that that's anything different when you're a youngster. Well, everybody grows up like this. This is fine. So when the lights came on again in 1945, it was a little bit different. But Jeff joined the business before I did in 1948. I didn't join until 1952. I did a little longer at college. I did engineering at college, and that did me well when we came to build our own factory. It was good to do that. But when we went in 1953 into do national service, it took us away from that comfort zone. Mother made breakfast. They did our washing. Everything was there. And we just backwards and forwards from doing work. Go away for 2 years and you learn something in the forces. It's self-sufficient, survival, the way to work things in life. And you begin to see life a little differently. And so when we came back after 2 years, we're looking at a company and they're making the same shoes that grandfather made way back in the 30s. Well, even beyond that. But grandfather, not many people know how successful he was. I mean, he was supplying Olympic athletes in the first decade, between 1900 and 1910. The second decade, of course, World War I took them away. Army boots, you name it, they were having to do that. By the time 1920 came along, he was supplying all the athletes at the Antwerp Olympic Games. And in the 20s, he supplied so many teams, the American team, Germans, with his track spikes. And I don't know if you remember the film Chariots of Fire.
Yes, I do. Yes, yeah. That's a classic.
Well, that immortalized 3 athletes. It was Eric Liddell, Lloyd Burley, and the other one was Harold Abrahams. And they all won gold medals, and that's why they were in the film. But they were supplied by my grandfather, Joe Foster. He made the shoes for them. So at that time, he was number one, no question. And he knew how to influence, which is to give the shoes to the top people and you influence the business. And that's how other people would buy his shoes. But unfortunately, my father and uncle, all that they did was continue the business. But you know, you need to drive a business forward. It can't plateau. It will go down if you don't drive it forward. And they didn't do that. So when Jeff and I, as I say, we went through our young days as kids on the street and then joined the company and then went to do national service and came back, we saw this company was failing. Jeff had been in Germany. He had seen Adidas, he'd seen Puma, and he came back. When he came back, he's trying to say to father, look, you know, this is what they're doing. And of course, when I came back, I was pushing and said, we've got to change. You've got to do marketing. They didn't do any marketing. They had no plan. But like the Adidas story, where Adi Dassler and Rudy Dassler didn't get on. They feuded with each other. So Rudy, he left and set up Puma. Well, the same applied to my father and uncle. They would fight more than they would talk. And in fact, we had to pull them apart on more than one occasion because they just didn't get on together at all. And you know, we look at this and think, how are we going to build a company out of this? And I'd say to my father, look, you know, we've got to do something. We've got to make changes. And all he would say to me is, look, when your Uncle Bill's gone and I'm gone, the company will be yours. You can do what you like. And I said, Dad, firstly, we don't want you to go. But secondly, this business will be gone long before you. There's no question of that, unless we change.
Yeah.
And we tried to persuade father for 3 years. And it was 1958, we decided enough's enough. And Jeff and myself, we left. Previous to that, went to college, to evening classes, to college, to learn more about shoemaking. Because all we knew was how to make running shoes and what we did in the factory. And I think that was really good for us because we made a lot of friends. We got a lot of advice. We were in the trade then, so we had people to help us. So when we did leave, we could buy second-hand machinery. And I mean, second-hand machinery in those days was nothing. The shoe industry, once the technology had moved on a bit, the old machinery, it was cheap. And let's face it, we were used to old machinery because that's all JD Foster had was old machinery. So even our old machinery was newer than they had. So we had a small business and we called it Mercury Sports Footwear. Okay, Mercury Sports Footwear, we were quite happy with that, good name. 18 months after being in business, the accountant said, Joe, you better register that name because you're doing quite well and you're making a bit of money. And if somebody else sees that and starts to make shoes with the name Mercury, you're going to have a lot of difficulty stopping them doing it if you don't register. So, okay. Of course, very naive. Well, what do we do? Well, you have to go and see an agent, and he will check this with the register of business names, and you go from there. Of course, the agent came back and said, "I'm sorry, Mercury is already pre-registered by, I think it's British Shoe Corporation, big shoemaking people, and he said they will sell it to you because they're not using it. They've registered it, they're not using it, and they'll let you have it for £1,000. Well, £1,000, we were barely sort of floated. Never mind find £1,000 or something. That's probably something like £100,000 today. It was, for us, it was impossible. So the agent said, "Well, look, you're going to have to change your name. So bring me 10 names. Don't bring me one because we have to test these with the register. And there's no use testing one at a time. We need to go in and then you can get your name." So we sat down and we came up with, at least 10 names. Birds, animals. But in 1943, during the war, I was 8 years old. And in a race, which I won, the prize was, of all things, a dictionary, a Webster's dictionary, which is an American dictionary. Why I would get an American dictionary during the war in 1943, I don't know. But anyway, I still had that dictionary. And I thought, let me have a look through this. I like the letter R. I thought it was a strong beginning to any word. So I'm looking through the R section. And of course, R-E, pretty quick, pretty soon I came across Reebok, R-E-B-O-K. Small South African gazelle. Gazelle. Well, we're in running shoes. Gazelle. That sounds just about right. Reebok. Easy. 2 syllables. Strong. I put this at the top of the list. Went back to the agent. And I said, "Look, I've got 10 names here, but this is the one we want. We've got to be in love with this. It's got to be our passion. It's got to be something that we really want to do." And as it happened, it came back there. He came back. The only name that really is free to register is Reebok. Oh, brilliant. Fantastic. But the registrar said, "Yes, but it's got to go in Part B of the register." And again, I said, "What's Part B of the register?" And he said, "Well, if somebody comes to us and say, we're making running shoes out of Reebok skin, we can't stop them." Oh, however, 20 years later, the registrar came back to us and said, "You've now been moved to Part A of the register because everybody knows now that Reebok is a shoe. It's not an animal."
Yes.
So that's how we became Reebok.
Wow. There's so much in this, Joe. I love this. There's quite a few things we can unpack. I would love to hear from you. What are some key principles that you live by when it comes to your mindset and what you focus on with this brand, with this business, to think like a billionaire? Because we have a lot of millionaire, multi-millionaires that listen to this podcast. We have a lot of entrepreneurs, people that are aspiring to build their businesses and scale. How does a billionaire-minded person think? What are some principles?
Well, I can only say that when Jeff and I started the business, I was 23 years old and Jeff was 25. We'd done national service. We knew our way around a bit. And, we were undefeatable. What was it? What could go wrong? Nothing. You're young enough. It doesn't matter if you fail because you don't have that in your brain. Things go wrong, but you go again. And it's having the... Our desire was to make a successful business, was to grow, was to do something that grandfather had started all those years back and that had sort of slipped away from the J.W. Foster company. So we were there, just let's go for it. And I think, I don't think that you know anything about being a millionaire or being rich. I don't think that money at that point or any point, if you're trying to build a brand, it is just success of the brand. Success to me was how far can we take this brand? And you don't even really have that as a measure. It's the next step. It's a step all the time. And yes, we did the things that we said J.W. Foster should do. We had marketing. We did the sales. But I used to go out and call on the sports stores in the UK. And I'm going out and I bring my bag with me and the shoes and say, look, I'm Reebok. And the store, the guy in the store would say, Reebok? Who? Well, look, we're running shoes, we've got this. And they'd say, well, look very nice, that's fine. And he said, but look, I've got Adidas, I've got Dunlop. Why do I need Reebok? And that in itself was a question that I got from a number of retailers. Some would buy my product, some would be happy to do it, but a lot in those early days would say, why do I need Reebok? And that's what made me think, well, and I would think, well, you don't really, because yes, you've got Adidas on your shelf, you've got Dunlop on your shelf, your shelves are pretty full, there's no space there. I had to make space. So why was the big question? And I did realize that I'm going around selling to retailers and I should be really selling my shoes to the athlete. That's the person who needed, they were the ones who were going to buy my product. The retailer was there as a resource, as somewhere in between that would make them available. But in the UK, we had the Amateur Athletics Association with 3 A's, and they had a handbook. And in that handbook were about 300 or 400 clubs affiliated to the 3 A's. And in that handbook, there was the name and address of every secretary of every club. Well, wow. There we go. It was just a matter of writing letters and what you put in the letter. And I offered them a 15% discount from retail. And I said, if anybody wants to become an agent, they can have that 15%, or you can just use it for club funds. I got a lot of agents, and I sold a lot of shoes that way. And it did drive the retail business. And a lot of them would phone me up and say, look, we believe you're selling direct to clubs. Look, if you stop doing that, we'll stock your product. I said, well, you're a bit late. We already now have a business. I'm quite willing to supply you, and I'll supply you at wholesale price. We only give a small discount to clubs, which you would probably give as well. I said, but you can have it at wholesale, but I'm not stopping what we're doing now, and that's selling direct to the clubs. Oh, and I would say that 60, 70% of them started to stock our shoes. So, it was getting through to, to our customer. And what that did, I think it raised the bar for our brand. Our brand suddenly became a desirable brand. We're just not another name on a shoe. A company in Northampton called Kingswell were making shoes, but they were just making shoes. Clark's, in their day, started to make training shoes, but Clark's, they were not perceived as a sports company. They were perceived as a street company. So we raised our game, and the perception of Reebok was a leading brand with innovative ideas. But for me, we had lost the opportunity to go into football. The reason for that is that by the time we set up our company in 1958, Adidas had already come in and had already taken that role. Even though way back in the 1920s, and we do have a letterhead of J.W. Foster's, he was supplying 96 clubs, football clubs, rugby clubs, with training shoes and boots. And you can name Manchester United, Manchester City, Everton, Liverpool, wow, Arsenal, all the teams that we know as Premiership players today, they were supplying it. And we have it in print. We've actually reprinted it so that people can see just how brilliant grandfather was. But I'm saying by 1958, we'd lost the opportunity. That would have been too expensive, too big to get into soccer. So for me, it was, well, the big place to be is America, because athletics and running, every university, every college had a coach. And you could actually go to university if you had abilities as an athlete. So I've got to get to America. This is where the big market is. And in 1968, courtesy of the Board of Trade in the UK, they wanted sports companies to export, and they were willing to pay for a stand, pay for the airfares, return airfares, and half of hotel bills to go to the American NSGA show, the National Sporting Goods Association of America, to go there and try to do exports. 1968 was my first attempt. I went there. Yeah, lots of people liked the shoes. That was good, yes. And it's like, well, where do I get your shoes? And I'm saying, England. England, yeah? Is that New England? No, it's not New England. It's England across the water. They didn't like that idea. The Americans have so much availability on their doorstep that they don't want the effort of trying to import things and go through customs and all that. No. So so the response was, well, when you get a distribution over here, we'd love to try your product. And the Americans are very open to that. More than the British was. I got that British. Why do I need your shoe? No, the Americans are not like that. They'd give it a try. But our luck was in, because what happened is that during the 70s, 1968, we just my first attempt. But all during the 70s, running took off in America. Running became a craze, absolutely. And this was driven by a magazine, Runner's World, and Runner's World. Runner's World and Nike almost grew at the same time, because Runner's World were just this Bible, everybody read it, and Nike were there in America, and they grew tremendously at that point, just as running grew. And Bob Anderson, who was the publisher of Runner's World, I got to know him quite well. He rated shoes. What they did, they were so, I don't know whether it's arrogant or what, but they knew that they had big influence to the market. And so they started rating shoes. So if you were a number one, all of a sudden, the demand for that product was just out of this world. In fact, you couldn't supply. It was usually Nike who came number one. And by the time they managed to get enough product, because they were importing from Japan, they just couldn't get it. It took 6 months to get this onto the shelves, because everybody demanded that shoe. And by the time they got it on the shelves, 3 months later, everybody's thinking, well, what's the next number one? And so the retailers are left with a lot of product. This lasted about 2 or 3 years. And somebody persuaded Bob Anderson, or Bob Anderson sort of figured it out himself. No, we can't keep doing this. So they changed this to a star rating. And it was 5-star, that was the best one. And then you would go down and you got your star ratings. That I knew was our opportunity. Running, wow, we're here. We're a running company. What we need now is a 5-star shoe. 1978, I designed the Aztec. And Aztec was designed to be a 5-star shoe. In fact, we called it the Gold Range. Aztec was our training shoe. We had Midas, again, Midas Gold. Midas was that was a racing shoe, a road racing shoe. And we had Inca. Inca was a spike track shoe. And we did fabulous at the Edmonton Commonwealth Games in 1978. We got a lot of gold medals. So by February of 1979, when the NSGA show was on again, and it's on in Chicago, and Chicago in February is cold. So cold. It's incredible.
Yeah, tell me about it.
This was our chance. So a lot of people looked at our shoes, thought they were brilliant, came out, wanted to order 25,000 pairs. Well, our factory, that was about 6 months for our factory at the time. Okay, I knew that if we got a 5-star shoe, we'd have to look around for added production. And Bata were quite happy. I'd already got them on board that they would make shoes for us. But also, they wanted it at a better price. And I knew that was also coming up, because now shoe production was going to the Far East. And we could get the product less than half the price from the Far East. So those were two things we had to do. We had to go to the Far East if we got a 5-star shoe.
Yes.
Well, Fireman also came along. He had a small distribution, an outdoor goods, Boston Camping it was. So he was in Boston and he had this small, and he said he'd also love to be our distributor. Well, I thought Kmart wouldn't be a distributor. Kmart would just be exposure, 25,000 birds. And if we managed to earn the money that they would want for the square footage that we would have in those stores, they might order again. But I wanted a distributor. I wanted somebody to work with. And I met Paul at the NSJ show, and we got on well. We really got on well together. But Paul said, I'd love to do this, but we need a 5-star shoe. I said, look, Aztec, this is it. This is going to be 5 stars. He said, can you guarantee that? Well, no, but I'll tell you something. It's got a really good shot. Okay, so it took till August until the till the shoe edition came out of Runner's World, and it's very well. It was midday for me, but I phoned Paul about 7 a.m. for him in Boston. I think I woke him up. I said, Paul, get down to the kiosk and see if you can pick up a Runner's World. It should be out today. An hour later, he came back. He said, John, Aztec, you got 5 stars. Brilliant. That was it. We got the hook. We got the key. He said, but not only that, your other 2 shoes, Midas and Inca, also got 5 stars. So we had 3 5-star shoes. Wow. That was our entree. That was the difference. That was the hook. And once we got that, it wasn't easy. A lot of work had to be done. How do you finance it? How do you get those cheaper shoes, the volumes? All those were issues that had to be addressed. And we did. Yeah. And the worst part about that is that just at that time, my brother became ill. And he was to die very quickly. He had cancer of the stomach. And so that really put not a lot of pressure on the factory. And I knew our factory was only small and we were having to go to barter. But Jeff would have gone to barter to take the patterns down there and work with them to get production. Yeah. He would have probably also had to go out to the Far East to work with the factories in the Far East to get them to do production. But I had to do the Far East trip, and I got other people to look after the factory. And so we got through that period. But and sales were going tremendously in America. But then we had a guy in Los Angeles, a tech rep. And this tech rep's called Angel Martinez. And I don't know if you know Angel Martinez or have heard of him, but he's quite a genius. Well, you've heard of UGG. Yes? UGG.
Brian, Brian, who initially was...
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, from Australia. Yeah, we had him on the podcast.
That's right. Well, Angel joined the company. And he took up to $1 billion in America. So,
that was the guy. Okay.
Yes, but Arnold is a tech rep down there in California, in Los Angeles, and his wife Frankie, she's going to these aerobic classes, and he's saying, "What the hell is that? Aerobic classes?" And she's coming back with her girlfriends, and they're full of it. Brilliant. And he said, "Well, what is it?" Well, it is actually exercise to music. Okay. All right. I must have a look at this one. So the next time we were going to the class, he went, and he's looking at it, and he sees the instructors wearing running shoes. Half the class were either wearing running shoes or plimsolls. The rest, not wearing the bare feet. He had a light bulb moment at that point and said, "Why don't we why don't we make shoes of glove leather?" Nice, comfortable. So they love it with a nice cushion sole, which is more or less running shoe technology. It's not much different. But I didn't know at the time when he talked about glove leather. Had I known then, I may have said something. Anyway, he went up to Paul Fireman. And said, "Paul, we've got this aerobics starting. It's looking really good down in Los Angeles." And Paul said, "So what do you want?" I said, "Well, I want to get some shoes. Why don't we make some shoes for this?" Paul said, "Look, Arnold, no. We're doing tremendous business here with running. We're growing. It's great. Why do we want to play around with a few shoes for some women dancing in Los Angeles?" But Arnold didn't take that for no. He wouldn't take that. He went round the back door and went in to see the production people. And he was very persuasive. And he said, why don't, would you make me 200 pairs with these shoes? Glove leather gave them the idea, and they made him 200 pairs of shoes. He delivered them down into Los Angeles, gave them to the instructors and some in the class. And that was it. Reebok suddenly became a fitness shoe company. We were known in the running scene, as it were, we were known. But really for the average person in America, nobody knew Reebok. They knew Nike, they knew Adidas, but they knew them as male, sweaty. Reebok is nice, beautiful, soft, cushion, woman's shoe, incredible. And being down there, it was picked up by everybody, picked up by the A-list stars. We had Sigourney Weaver wearing high tops, picking up her Emmy Award. And we had Jane Fonda. Jane Fonda was doing the videos in Reebok, and Reebok didn't have to pay. It wasn't in those days. It was they were so happy.
She was huge. She was huge at that time as well. She was everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So all of a sudden, this is the visibility that you need as a brand, and that it took 3 or 4 years to really become international, but Reebok became this aerobics brand.
Yeah, and
Nike, New Balance, Adidas, they all stood back. No, it's just a phase. It's nothing. But it took Reebok from $9 million to $30 million to $90 million to $300 million, and then $900 million in successive years.
Wow.
And the problem that brings is, where do you get the production from?
Yeah, you got to scale.
We were very lucky because at the time, Nike was just hitting a bit of a wall. They had lots of stuff on order and the sales were just going down at that time. Every company seems to do that. So a bit more luck as well, because we could fill those factories in the Far East. We could fill them with aerobics. So the time is so important, and that's where your luck is. But by the time I retired from the company in 1989, we were doing $3.8 billion. We'd overtaken Adidas, we'd overtaken Nike, and we were number one global sports footwear manufacturer.
Wow.
So, and by that time, all I was doing, I'd put on all the distribution globally. I'd been down in Australia. I put the Hendersons on, the Handlers. They had started doing a good job. So I was just jumping on an airplane, traveling, arriving, being picked up by a limousine, going to the best hotels, sitting down and having some very special dinners and conversations. But for me then, the excitement had gone in terms of the challenge. I'd been growing up with a challenge for 20-something years. In fact, it was 31 years by the time I did decide to move out. But we went through some fantastic periods. A friend of ours, well, he became a friend, but he was down in Los Angeles, Wendell Niles. He knew everybody in the film industry, and he got us into Monte Carlo, into the Monte Carlo pro celebrity tennis tournaments. And we would have, every year, we would have 15, 20 stars coming in. Frank Sinatra came in. A lot of the big stars came just to enjoy Monte Carlo. And we had a lot of top tennis players. And so that was really incredible. Meeting all these people was fantastic. And for about 2 or 3 years, I spent my time enjoying that side of life. But with Reebok, the challenge was over. And I decided it was probably time to step back. But it's a bit like, and I retired out of the company, but a bit like the Eagles and Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never leave. And so I was continually drawn back into the company. And I still have that enthusiasm for the company even today. But I decided I better get it down into a book before the mind goes completely.
Great. I love this. So Joe, and I just want to say, this is a very special podcast episode. Okay. And one of the reasons being is, I mean, I love what you've shared. Amazing stuff. Another reason is that sometimes when we have guests on, actually most of the time, they'll share like, tip number one, strategy this, principle that. I got so much from you sharing the story and the journey, right? Because a lot of people see the glory, but they don't hear the story, right? And so you sharing this, there were so many lessons that came out of that. And if I was to kind of pull it apart, the first thing you said, and this is for the listeners too, just to really like get these notes here, is that it's about just forging forward, right? Like being relentless in your pursuit, and there is no failure. You just keep learning lesson to lesson and keep going. I remember somebody recently saying to me, if you knew for sure that all you needed was 10,000 no's in order to have $1 billion, would you do it? And it was such a profound question because like, wow, like most people would say yes, because it's like, well, if I get used to no, but I also know on the side of it, at some point there'll be a yes, there's got to be so much more that I haven't even experienced yet. Right. So with you, that's like such a big part of your journey. But what I also love about what you did, from what you shared about you and your brother really working together, is that you understood that you were like the visionary and your brother was like the integrator, and you really played your part so well with strength for strength. You also, in that, got really resourceful. You were willing to go and look for the agents and look for the key people of influence to be able to connect with. You really moved close to the heartbeat of what was going on in order to be able to really bring what you believe was this incredible dream to life. And I love that you did that, man. It's just so cool to hear it. And you did it in such an awesome way that now you get to share as your wisdom. There's so many young entrepreneurs that are probably hearing this. And I challenge you right now, and I'm sure Joe would too, is like, hold yourself to that higher ground and get vision focused. Before we wrap up this interview here, is there any last points that you'd like to drop in on that you feel like anybody that's aspiring should really get their head around to keep it real when it comes to entrepreneurship?
I think when coming back to saying, so many no's, my first trip to America was 1968. And I went every year. And I didn't get my distributor till 1979. That's 11 years. In that time, I had at least 6 failures, at least 6 attempts with different people to make it. And we didn't make it. It took that 11 years. It took a lot of failures, a lot of no's, as you were saying, to get there. But I think you've got to have the vision that no is not an answer. No is only just a little hiccup on the way. No is something to get around. No is another problem. But another problem means you're learning something else. You're learning more. Every time. We had a lot of problems. Growing up, a lot. But problems, you've got to look at them really as a learning curve, as an advantage. You've got to say, well, if that's come along, that's a problem. What are we doing wrong? And how can we turn this around to take to our advantage? And more often than not, we found that it made us determined to do it, but we had to do it a bit differently. So we looked around. The retailers wouldn't accept me at first, so I had to look, how do I get to my customer? And it gives you a different vision. It helps you, in fact, to achieve. If you don't have any no's, I don't know anybody can achieve without those sorts of no's and those failures. So if you're a budding entrepreneur, you've got to be young. You have to be young. Jeff and I were young. We were indestructible. And you keep that principle. And if you're young, you can go in there. When really, entrepreneur it's another name for a risk taker, because if it's certain, everybody will do it. No, you have to take that risk. You have to push through that barrier, through the fog, the smoke, or whatever it is. You have to say, what's the other side? And you have to be willing to take a deep breath and go for it. And I think every entrepreneur, anybody who wants to get anywhere, will face that as a problem. Because if you ask questions, ask somebody for advice, should I do this? More often than not, they'll be very cautious. People ask me, and I say, just go for it.
Yeah.
Just go for it, because you'll only regret it if you don't. And if you fail, so what? Get up, go on again. Yes. It's nobody's going to kill you for it. But you'll kill yourself if you don't do what you think. I must try this. I must do it. So anybody who has a feeling or an ambition, and today, We didn't have any computers. We didn't have mobile phones.
Yep.
I was totally in the dark. When I got onto an airplane and went somewhere, I had to get to a hotel. And even the hotel, you had to use the reception. You couldn't pick up the phone and dial anybody. You just had to use the reception, and they would try and get you a connection. Quite often it wouldn't work, and you'd wait an hour or two before you could get a connection. Sometimes I had to wait a day. They'd say, I can't get through today, I can get you through tomorrow. And I'd say, I'm sorry, I'll be on my way tomorrow, I won't be here. So, you're playing everything as, look, I'm in control. I don't need anybody else. I've got to do this. I can't find anybody else. I've got to know what I'm doing is right. And even if it's wrong, you've got to be willing to change your mind. But you've got to do it. It's got to be you. You can't just sit there and hesitate. So, and anybody who's a youngster, just give it a try. Don't worry.
I love this, Joe. Wow. Amazing wisdom. It sounds like you were practicing learning to trust yourself, your decisions that you made. You kept your eye focused on the vision. Your heart was focused on the vision too. I love this. So Joe, your book, you've got it out now. People are able to purchase this. If you're listening right now, get your hands on it. I know that you and I are just literally scratching the tip of the iceberg of what's in this book. I know there's so much wisdom and gems in this book. You've compounded decades and decades of wisdom into literally days of reading, or even a day of reading in this book. So you'd be borderline crazy if you don't pick this book up. So make sure you get your hands on it. Where else can we see you online, Joe?
I think we're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Yep. All the big stuff.
And well, on LinkedIn. We're big on LinkedIn.
Hey, there you go. Awesome stuff.
Yeah.
So if you're listening right now, make sure you connect with Joe, get his book. Joe, before we wrap up this interview, I have one last question for you. Okay. And this question is, if you were to deliver your last 30-second speech, right? Just a quick 30 seconds, what would your parting advice be?
Enjoy life. Have fun, fun, and fun. Those are three most important aspects of a business. Have fun.
Oh man, I love that. That's awesome.